recognising that both Jim and Keith have had very separate experiences with returning to the workforce. Keith's was very successful and continues to be. Jim, when you moved on from the education department...
I resigned.
You resigned. How then did you find a new meaning around your productive life as a relatively young man, or a very young man when you resigned? How did you put meaning back into...
I'm older than I look.
Aren't we all, ladies and gentlemen? But how did you reinforce your self-worth, Jim?
Sure. Look, and that was becoming involved as a mental health advocate through an organisation here in Victoria. It was becoming involved with people like Ingrid Ozels, people like yourself, and this is not just a rap session. This is just the truth. I think most of my friends nowadays have are the initiated, if in a sense, into mental health issues and understand mental health issues and understand how it works, and that it brings out the very best in people or it brings out the very worst in terms of the stigma. I mean, I have some solutions to this. I have some ideas.
Please.
That I think can help, and I think that well, goodwill is absolutely fundamental. I don't necessarily think education is. I think it has a big part to play, but if that goodwill is not there, the education, what people learn about mental illness, won't come into play. I think there really needs to be a procedural regulation of people that have a disability, and that mental illness needs to be seen in the same level or the same degree of intolerance as we treat racism, as we treat sexism, as we treat physical disability. And that mental illness disability has to be brought up to that level where no one will dare confront you with it as a, as a weapon.
Yes.
That it cannot be used as a weapon.
It seems like the issues around disclosure have had very different outcomes for Jim and Keith. And in one case it was a very positive outcome because the employer or the nest of employers were empathic to those concerns and were able to respond in an appropriate way, and the opposite is true. And I wonder what the role is or what is the perfect employer? How does that employer embrace those things that we find ongoing concerns for someone who is about to disclose and might not disclose if they felt that was not going to be received well?
Perhaps Jim or Keith might like to make a comment around disclosure.
I'd just like to say that the rule of thumb, the acid test, is goodwill. Goodwill, always start with that as a fundamental principle. And in addition to starting with goodwill, don't listen to rumours and innuendo, but judge people by the facts of the situation. Look at their record, look at their history, look at what has happened in the past. There might be aberration. I mean, all of us have aberrations that occur through our lives at different points, and we all do silly and stupid things and quite irrational things at different points, and that's a given. I mean, I defy anyone in this room to say that they haven't. But I think that's a given. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you are incapable of doing a job or you're mentally unstable.
How do you create a workplace that's not conducive to these type of discussions? How does one create it where a situation such as you've described so well to us today could in fact be avoided, or at least nowhere near the impact it had on you? Is that a reasonable summary? Thank you.
I think there've got to be strict disincentives for strategic discrimination, if you want. And I think it gets back to what I said before. I think that there needs to be simply a complete intolerance for discrimination on the basis of mental illness. Just like we're moving towards in our society a complete intolerance of discrimination on the basis of racism, sexism and physical disability. I think it's going to be a social change, just like people don't drink like they did 30 years ago and go out and drive, just like attitudes to tobacco smoking are changing. I know they're the best examples I can think of at short notice. There needs to be a real ingrained intolerance in our community to these forms of discrimination, that people simply don't dare to raise these issues in a negative and discriminatory way. And I think it needs the weight of that, because I don't think you can always rely on people's goodwill. I wish you could. I was naive enough some years ago to think if you sat somebody down and you explained to them the situation and you educated them, if you like, that people would come to the party, they would understand, there would be an innate human compassion that would come out. Well, I'm sorry, I've been very disabused of that idea. And that might sound bitter. It's not bitter. It's just a recognition of the facts. It's just a recognition of a new modus, a new way of doing things that you have to do.